Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are really digging into the strategy of Judicial Watch. Now, this is a conservative activist group that's put what they call election integrity right at the center of their mission. We're going to walk through their recent testimony to Congress to really get a handle on their core arguments and their tactics.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at how they even define the problem. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what they call dirty voter rolls. After that, we'll cover their take on mail-in voting, their whole courtroom strategy, and wrap it up with the new laws they're pushing for.
So right out of the gate, their presentation frames the whole thing as a crisis of confidence. We're not just talking about technical details here. For them, it's about something much bigger: the public's basic trust in the entire election process.
And this quote from Russ Vought, it really sets the stage for their entire argument. What they're saying is, look, the problem isn't that people can't vote. The problem, in their view, is that the basic rules aren't being enforced. So right away, the whole debate is framed around security, not access.
So you might be asking, how does this security concern actually play out in their work? Well, it all boils down to their number one focus: what they call the dirty rolls problem. And honestly, this idea is the absolute cornerstone of their entire strategy, both in court and in politics.
Okay, so what exactly do they mean by dirty rolls? Well, for Judicial Watch, it's pretty specific. They're talking about the official state voter lists that they claim have millions of registrations that shouldn't be there, for people who've passed away, moved, or are somehow registered in more than one place. And to give you a sense of the scale they're talking about, they often point to this huge number, 24 million. This actually comes from a finding mentioned in a past Supreme Court case. It suggested that about 1 out of every 8 voter registrations in the U.S. was invalid or way off base. So for Judicial Watch, this isn't just some random number. It's their proof of a major systemic problem. And they get even more specific. They drill down into that 24 million figure and pull out this number, 2.75 million. This is how many people they say were registered to vote in more than one state at the same time. It's a perfect example of the kind of inaccuracy they're really focused on. And here's where they point to their own results. They claim that because of their lawsuits and their pressure campaigns, they've directly gotten over 5.8 million names they consider ineligible, scrubbed from voter rolls all across the country. Okay, so according to Judicial Watch, you take this problem of inaccurate voter rolls, and it gets a whole lot more serious when you bring in universal mail-in voting, where ballots are just automatically sent out to every single person on those registration lists. So, in their testimony, they lay out what they see as some major risks. They argue that when you mail ballots to everyone, it weakens the whole chain of custody. It could, they say, open the door for someone to be pressured at home, create all sorts of chances for administrative screw-ups or even interference. And all of this, in their view, just chips away at the public's trust in the system. Okay, so what's their game plan to fix all this? Well, their main strategy isn't trying to lobby politicians. It's litigation. They go to court. They sue states and counties directly to try and force them to clean up those voter lists. Now, their lawsuits aren't just pulled out of thin air. They're built on a federal law called the National Voter Registration Act, or the NVRA. And this law is pretty clear. It says states have to make a reasonable effort to maintain their voter lists. So Judicial Watch's legal argument really has 2 parts. First, they say lots of states just aren't doing that. And second, they claim those same states are illegally hiding the records that would prove it. And their presentation gives some pretty concrete examples. So take Oregon. They sued the state over inactive voters. And right after that, Oregon announced it was doing a massive list cleanup. Or look at California, where they're in court over what they call a ridiculously low number of removals. Then there's Mississippi, where they actually won a case challenging the counting of ballots that showed up after Election Day. And they use this timeline from a lawsuit in Illinois to make a really important point. These legal battles are a slog. They're not quick wins. They highlight how it took 4 years, just to get a court to say, okay, this lawsuit can move forward. It really shows you just how long and drawn out this work can be. But their strategy isn't just about fighting it out in court. There's a whole other side to it. The second pillar of their work is all about pushing for new laws at both the federal and state level that are designed to, in their words, standardize and tighten up election rules. A really key part of this legislative push is their support for a bill called the SAVE Act. Now, this is a proposed law that's already passed the House, and it would basically turn a lot of the policies they've been fighting for into the law of the land on a national scale. And really, the SAVE Act is just one part of their much bigger wish list. They also support things like a national voter ID requirement, making people prove their citizenship to register, and having the same election deadlines everywhere. From their perspective, these are all necessary changes to make the system more secure and, more trustworthy for everyone.
And this quote, I think it really sums up their whole philosophy perfectly. They're making it clear that they don't just pop up every 2 or 4 years when there's an election. No, they see themselves as working on this stuff all year, every single year, constantly filing lawsuits and pushing their agenda.
Which brings us right back to where we started, to that fundamental tension at the very heart of this whole debate. As we've just walked through, from their point of view, the focus is squarely on security. And that leaves us with a really big question to think about. In a modern democracy, what is the right balance between making sure it's easy for every eligible citizen to cast their vote and, at the same time, guaranteeing the process is secure from any errors or potential fraud?